Well, I tell
Thanks,
you, we
man.
have two more programs here tonight, and well, at least the first one I know for a fact is excellent. Our next presenter is Bon French. Bon grew up in Peoria and began photographing trains in 1961. He worked as an extra board brakeman on the Sioux Line in Schiller Park while in school at Northwestern University. Over the years, he and his friend Dick Neumiller made nearly 40 trips to photograph trains, which resulted in a total number of railroads photographed of about 700, which is just huge. Bon is chairman of Adams Street Partners, which is an investment firm that specializes in private markets. He's a trustee at Northwestern University, and perhaps most important, most notable for our audience, is he's the chairman of the Center for Railroad Photography and Art. Bon's story about Rochelle in the latest edition of First and Fastest is what prompted me to extend an invitation for him to present here tonight. Here's an interesting fact about Bon French. He has a family farm, and on that farm, he has a Caterpillar bulldozer, and he uses it for various projects on his farm, and he does provide Caterpillar driving lessons. See him individually for that. Bon, would you walk up to the microphone and say hello and launch into your program, please?
Sure will. Thanks, Mike. Can everybody see the screen?
Perfectly.
Thank you. So, thanks for that nice introduction, Mike. And I guess I live a life of contrast between the investment management world and the bulldozer on the farm, but such as it is. As Mike said, I grew up in Peoria, Illinois. Dick Neumiller did too. And he was 21 years older than I was, and our parents were friends, is how we met. He was born in 1931 and passed away about 5 or 6 years ago. And we quickly realized, again through my parents, that we both had an interest in trains, and we went out on our first dedicated train watching and photography trip in 1961 when I was 9. And he was 30, which made him seem ancient to me at the time. But we went to the Edelstein, which is not far from where we lived in Peoria. And Dick's passion was as much about photography as it was about trains. He photographed lots of other things besides trains, belonged to the Peoria Camera Club and so forth and so on. And he had a very good camera. He started taking his first color railroad slides in 1950. And I emphasize the word color because unlike many at the time who kind of dropped their cameras because of the demise of steam, he loved the color of the diesels and particularly of the streamliners. So during the 50s, he pursued photography of passenger trains. Of course, at that time we weren't sure they were going to go away as quickly as they did, but he photographed not only the engines, which he thought were very colorful, but also the end of the train and the observation cars and so forth and so on. So that was what really drove him. And of course, EMD and ALCO and others developed color schemes for many railroads in their own art departments. And so that was, a fun thing in its day. So for years and years and years on these trips that Dick and I took, he talked about what was going to happen to his slides. And, we had lots of ideas, but finally one day he said, Bon, I want you to have them. And that was a complete shock to me because I never thought I would end up with them. He has 82,400 color slides. They're almost all Kodachrome in the early days and then Fuji later, starting with ASA 10 and 12 and so forth. So So one day in 1955, and that's what this is all about, Rochelle isn't very far from Peoria. He went to photograph the passenger trains at Rochelle. And so this is sort of a day at Rochelle. There are 19 images here, so it's not a lot of photos. He took a few more photos, and I didn't put them all in here, but it'll give you a sense of what was happening in Rochelle in June of 55. Now, of course, some of these slides to me look a little grainy. It's just the number of pixels that we decided to present for the presentation. The actual slides, again, taken, 65 years ago, look like the day they were taken. It's amazing how the Kodachrome has endured, and they're very sharp. So this is early in the morning. First shot of the day was Chicago Northwestern. This is a UP City of Denver, train number 112. And you'll note the 112 is in the front number board. And this is taken from the steps of the Rochelle Tower. And it's here, it's powered by Northwestern E8 and E7 going eastbound. Now, just across the tracks, a little bit later, this is the Eastbound UP Challenger, powered by two E8s, a number 5028As in the lead. This was built in 1953, so you have to put yourself back in time. This engine was only 2 years old when he photographed it. It was pretty new, so it's hard for us to think about it in that way, but this was train number 108, the Challenger, that was coming through quick on the heels of the city of Denver. And the next train, and I know these look a little repetitive, but I thought I'd just show you what was happening at Rochelle. This is June 26th, by the way, all these photos. One day, June 26, 1955. This is the eastbound UP City of Los Angeles, number 104, behind two Northwestern E7s. And this has a dome car in it, you'll see. And then this came along. And this is a Clinton local, eastbound Clinton local. Somebody told me that might be the Omaha local, but others thought it was a Clinton local. Regardless, it was still powered by Pacific 462, number 526. And this was pretty unusual in June of 55, at this late date, to see steam on the Northwestern beyond the commuter service, because they did use steam in a commuter service, but not really beyond that. And all steam entered on the Northwestern in May 11th, to be precise, of 56. So only 11 months later, all the steam was gone. And one of the things you'll see as a theme here in these slides is that there are things that are brand new that just were in service. At the same time, there are things that are just about to disappear. And so again, it's quite a contrast in terms of what was available in the summer of 55. So next up at the Diamond was this. C-beam-Q, 4 FTs, an ABBA unit. And this is actually one of my favorite shots because there's so much rarity in it. The tower is hidden by the first unit. I'll have some other pictures of the tower itself, but all the rods from the tower control signals and derails and switches and so forth. And the other thing that's interesting here is the sidings, almost all of which are gone now, but with all the boxcars. Both on the Burlington and the Chicago Northwestern that was servicing industry, which was still, a very big part of the railroad then. So moving on, this is what happened. Well, the freight was going by, the westbound Twin Cities Zephyr number 21 zipped by, and here it's called the Morning Zephyr for short. Departing Chicago in the morning. It had lots of new domes on the train. And Dick actually has the coming at you shot, with both the freight and passenger units passing, but it was several blocks away and backlit, so I didn't put it in. But he got this great shot of the Zephyr going by the freight while they had an opening in the Northwestern traffic. And then back to the Northwestern. Here's the tower in the background on the left. Obviously, it's long gone. Here's a westbound freight now coming across after the Q had sent 2 trains. This is an F7, number 4077C. And so this was built in 1949. There's another F7A behind it. So this unit was only 6 years old in 1955. This was reasonably new power for the Northwestern. And this particular engine, number 4077C, was retired in 1966. So it only had a 17-year life. Then this train came eastbound. I really like this shot too. You'll notice a lot of stock cars on the head end, probably coming from Iowa to the Chicago stockyards. This is powered by an F7A-BA combination. Again, these F7s were built in 49. This particular lead unit, 4074A, later became renumbered to Chicago Northwestern 424. It ran a commuter service for a long time. I live in Glen Ellen, Illinois, on the West Line, which is what this is, and I've commuted downtown for 41 years from Glen Ellen, and it was obviously the Northwestern in the beginning, and I probably rode behind this engine at some point. Later in its life, in the 80s, it was traded to New Jersey Transit, and then traded from in the 90s from New Jersey Transit Metro North, and then it was preserved, and so it is today at the United Railway Historical Society in New Jersey, repainted as a Reading unit. So here it is, 65 years later. This unit is actually still with us. There was another, if you were recording everything, and Dick did, another eastbound freight with F units, but it's an identical photo to this, so I didn't include it. But it was there was another freight train that went east here. Of course, the Northwestern, as you all know, is left-hand running, so that's an eastbound on the left-hand track. And this happened. Now, we didn't get the head end, but the city of Portland came running, wrong main. It was running around the 2 eastbound freights ahead of it. And this, again, is June 26, 1955, eastbound city of Portland. This dome observation car was brand new from ACF. It was built in 1955. And so looks a little dirty in this photo. It's a little backlit based on the sun and so forth, but it's a reasonably rare photo for a lot of reasons. One is that the UP modified these observation cars only a year later in 1956 to run mid-train or throughout the train, so they had more flexibility as to where to put the car. So it was only a year or so that these cars were actually running at the rear of the train. So this was a pretty...
Looks like that particular crossing gate didn't come down.
Well, it did, and I can see what bits are. I think Dick is standing just inside the crossing gate. Inches inside the crossing gate's my guess. And he probably was outside of the crossing gate when the train flew by, but as he saw the rear coming, he would have stepped around the end of the crossing gate by a few inches and snapped this photo.
No, we just noticed. We just noticed it looked like a manual gate, and it looked like the gate itself, the one next to the rear car, remained upright.
Yeah, I don't know. So let's see, where are we? So the next train, a little time went by. The next train was the Westbound Challenger, UP Challenger. number 107, departing the interlocking at Rochelle. So this was more typical of the things in its day, but nice clean train. And then this came by. This is the eastbound City of San Francisco, number 102, powered by an E8, number 5030B, also built in 1953, so pretty new, and an E7 behind it. And then Dick took the going away shot of this, and it's not the best. A cloud came by, but I didn't want to exclude it either. So you'll note in this train, there are no domes. There were almost all some domes and almost all the other pictures. In fact, if you go back to the prior slide, you can look at the front of the train and see there's no domes. And here's the rear of the train, no domes. So the other thing that was interesting here is that, like, the fifth car from the rear looks maybe like an Illinois Central car. I can't really tell for sure, but it's not a UP car. So not sure what that's all about. The thing that makes all of this even more poignant is that an end of an era was approaching. And 4 months later, on October 30th of 1955, the UP switched all of its Streamliner passenger chains from the Northwestern to the Milwaukee Road. And so I don't know if everyone knew about that in advance. Maybe Dick did, and went up to Rochelle for that express purpose, to photograph these city trains on the Northwestern before they moved over to the Milwaukee Road. But pretty interesting, obviously. So then he moved to the curve, just east of downtown Rochelle. And it's one of my favorite places even today. And this is getting to be afternoon. And this is the eastbound Northern Pacific North Coast Limited, number 26, powered by two E8s, 9948B is in the lead. And again, some new things here. The Northern Pacific domes were only built 1 year earlier, 1954. So they were new equipment on this train. The next train by pretty quickly was the Empire Builder. And this is powered by two E9s, 9991 on the front. It was built in 1954 itself, one of 16 that the Burlington ordered. So it was only a year old. And according to the research I did, the Great Northern domes were built in May of 55. So they were only 1 month old in this photo, as all of the railroads were competing to upgrade their passenger service at this time. And I should add that Norm Carlson helped produce a lot of this research when he produced these photos for his article on First and Fastest. Paul Uso, who's on the line tonight, helped organize some of these slides, and Scott Lotus at the center helped me put this together. So there was a group effort to make this possible. The next train was this one. This is one of my favorite shots. This is the Westbound Northern Pacific North Coast Limited, number 25, and it's powered by an E8A, 9941, built in 1950. So even that engine was only 5 years old. But most interestingly, behind the E8 are two shovel nose B units. And my CB&Q fans say this is pretty rare to get both of them. This is 9906 and 9907. They were built in October of 1936 with their A units, 9906A and 9907A for the Denver Zephyr. And Lewis Marr's book, which I've darn near worn out, called Diesel Locomotives, the First 50 Years, he says in there when describing these particular units that the B units possibly ran until late into 1955. Well, here they are at speed going northbound, timetable westbound in late June 1955, pulling this train. Other neat things here, obviously, are the coal dock and water tower. And again, this is right at the beginning of this curve. So today, everything is changed in this photo. Cold storage warehouses are in the farm field to the left there, or east, switched by the Burlington Junction today. A lot of buildings there. I-88 crosses in the distant background, probably a half mile or so south here, past the signal bridge in the distance. So it's, again, the scene is unrecognizable, and obviously the coal dock and the water tank are a long time gone. This is the train going the other way. Dick just spun around, and here it is. You see the two B units, ancient B units, way at the far left. A beautiful North Coast Limited train with again new domes, and I always thought that this particular paint scheme was one of the most beautiful and classy out there. And again, this is one of the things that Dick was after by going to Rochelle in 1955. And this came by pretty quickly. This is another Twin Cities Zephyr. This is number 22. Powered by two E7s, and it's a 9-car train with 6 domes. So I guess you didn't have to run up to the dome car to get a seat. You had your choice of many of them. And as you all probably know, the CB&Q, along with the Rio Grande, were the railroads with the California Zephyr to help invent the dome car. And CB&Q was an early adopter of domes. Beautiful ride, of course, up the Mississippi River. And these domes were built in 1947 and 1948. So they were on board way before the other railroads got their domes in service. And this was fun. The same trains, Dick whirled around and photographed the Twin Cities Zephyr going southbound to Chicago out of Rochelle. And again, this is a neat location with the coal dock and the water tower and nothing else in the background, which is completely different than today. And my last slide is this one. Now, this is not a Rochelle, but this was actually the next slide in his CB&Q slide deck. And this is only taken 6 weeks later. So after all those fancy high-speed streamliners and new equipment flying through Rochelle, here is this CB&Q mixed train. It's in the official guide. It has a number. It's number 77 westbound. And it's on a branch that leaves Fort Madison, Iowa, and goes to Bloomfield, Iowa. It's scheduled to leave Fort Madison at 8 in the morning and arrive Bloomfield at 11:45. So this is sort of midday. Dick's on the north side of the track here. And that's only 65 miles. Scheduled in almost 4 hours. So, going through the tall weeds, this is, the Burlington was still running the passenger service of all kinds. Talk about contrasts that you could see. The locomotive is interesting too. At first, I just thought it was an SW1. Then I realized it had 2 stacks. So it wasn't an SW1. It's actually an SW. It's a pretty rare 600 horsepower 1938 EMC, before there was an EMD, SW. It's number 9130. And the Burlington ordered 6 of these, 9130 through 9135. And this was one of their earliest diesel switchers ever, and still running in 1955 on this lightweight rail. This line was built in March of 1957 as the Fort Madison, West Point, Keosaga, and Bloomfield Railroad to bring interior grain to the Mississippi River at Fort Madison. The branch ran parallel to and was about 25 miles south of the CB&Q main line between Burlington and Ottumwa, and Bloomfield was just south of Ottumwa by about 25 miles. And it was abandoned in parts in a year later, in 1956 and 57. And Scott Lothridge found a topo map of Fort Madison in 1958 that showed this as abandoned railroad right away out of Fort Madison. So again, I just put this in there to show the things that were about to disappear in 1955 and the things that were brand new, and kind of a fun contrast that summer. So on with that, I'm happy to take any questions and appreciate your attention.
Good stuff.
Thank you, Bon. Wonderful presentation. Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
And does anybody
And
have
Mark,
any comments or questions for Bon?
Just one comment that I think somebody mentioned during the program about that one slide that look at the crossing gate was up. If you do look in the photograph, you can see the newer electronic crossing gate is down. The crossing gate that is up is probably the old air driven or pneumatic crossing gate that was probably decommissioned but not removed yet.
Got it. Thanks.
I posted a comment. Do you think that steam engine shot might have been the Kate Shelley?
I don't know about that. It's possible. It was still running. It ran, I think up until Amtrak, right? Till 1971. I know it was running in the late 60s.
I wrote it July 18th of 66 out of Clinton, got back to Chicago.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, and just for Mark Flynn on the Santa Fe, because Dick grew up, near the Santa Fe, Transcon and Chillicothe and Peoria, and he went to Knox College in the early 50s with the Santa Fe there. He has many early slides beginning in 1950 of the Santa Fe all over the system, but mainly in Illinois. And in total, he has 6,400 Santa Fe slides. So
oh my God.
happy to share them with you. And we did a lot of trips, everywhere, Texas and Tehachapi and so forth and so on. So
We'll
in
have
fact,
to get
your slides out.
my heart started again before we can do that.
Yeah, no, I put it in here because it was not the context here, but tons of Alco PA shots.
Oh man, I would love to see
But-
some of that.
And doodle bugs running, all that stuff. So it's really great what he captured. Mike introduced me by saying that I photographed 700 railroads, and that's maybe more, but I think that's rough justice. Dick has somewhere between 800 and 900 that he photographed.
Oh,
So it's we had kind of an unspoken and unofficial goal trying to photograph every road in the US in the last 40, 50 years. And of course, it's like trying to play every golf course. It's impossible because there's always a new one and
yep.
ones disappear. But we did pretty good at getting most of them. So.
Well, that was really impressive, man. I was just sitting here gasping for breath.
Well, the last thing I'd say is, and I didn't say this, should have said this earlier. So I at Rochelle, I showed 16 trains. 12 of them were passenger trains.
Yep.
And only 4 freights. And I know Dick would never have passed up a chance to photograph a train. So if there was another freight train, he would have photographed it. But it's just remarkable. And this caused Scott Lotus, who loves the Mississippi River and whatnot, to go back to an old official guide and see what was scheduled during a 24-hour period up to the Twin Cities on the Burlington. And he said there were 11 or 12 trains each way a day. No, not each way. I think it was in total. Only 3 or 4 freights.
Wow.
So it was just on the Q side alone, it was heavy passenger. And you saw the representation on the Northwestern. It was almost all city trains, you know, of the UP, different kinds, city of San Francisco, city of Denver, city of Portland, city of LA, et cetera, Challenger.
Yeah, that was what I found really interesting was, you know, shots of the city trains on the Northwestern. Those were taken 3 months before I was born.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I live in Glen Ellen, of course, they all came through here, but I never saw them. So it was, so anyway, that's says something about the density of service. And Rochelle's still a great place to go today. Obviously, there's probably more trains today and more tonnage going through there than ever. But, you know, obviously there's not a single passenger train.
Not one.
Hasn't been. Yeah. So a totally different look at it.
Well, thank you, Bon. We're going to continue on with
Thanks.
our program
Thanks, Mike.
here.
Yep.
Thanks again.